It's time for Pure Performance.
Get your stopwatches ready. It's time for Pure Performance with Andy Grabner and Brian Wilson. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Pure Performance. My name is Brian Wilson, and as always, I have with me my fashionable colleague, Andy Grabner. Andy Grabner, how are you doing today?
I'm pretty good, and I'm very glad to hear that on air. You don't call me what you call me when we're not on air, which was a different word you used.
You mean fantastic and loving and caring and kind and stupendous?
Yeah, not annoying Austrian, I know.
No, not at all. Not at all. So this is a weird show today because we're celebrating our 150th episode, but this isn't our 150th episode.
Yeah,
right?
But it almost feels like it.
It's our virtual. We're virtualizing our 150th episode just because of timing and schedules and all that. So let's all pretend today that this is our 150th episode, which is coming up very soon, dear listener, but it's not quite.
Should we
we'll
consider this an experiment? Like, what happens if this would be the 150th episode?
Well, we're traveling back in time to celebrate it before the 150th.
Okay.
Yeah, it's however you might want to consider it, or maybe it was a glitch in the matrix, if you will. Although that gets me to too many red pill dudes, who are really annoying. Yeah. But anyhow, we're going way off topic, and our guest is itching to get on. And before we introduce him, I wonder. Let's give a moment. Let's do a Dora the Explorer style. Do you know who our guest is today? And then we look at the camera and wait. That's right. Our guest is
Mr. Mark Tomlinson.
Yes.
Hello, friends. I have come from the future. I'm here to share with you what you will have talked about already in the past, in the future, on your 150th episode.
So, friend of the show, inspiration for the show,
muse of the show. Can I be a muse? Is that okay?
Yes, you are our muse.
Great.
You are our Bugnish, and if anybody listening gets that.
Hopefully I'm attractive enough to be a muse.
And Mark, you can confirm that the stuff that you're drinking out of your cup is in fact tea or coffee and not an adult beverage.
It's not. Actually, Andy, behind you and I have the same espresso maker.
Yeah.
Right? It's the Dedica, I think it is. The DeLonghi. Yeah. And I got the hopper grinder with it. I'm digging it. So I'm having anywhere from 4 to 6 shots of pure espresso every day.
Oh, that's fantastic. Wow, it's going to be one of those shows, everybody. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Much more fun.
And Mark, what's before we dive into it? What's up with what's going on with the PerfBytes? It's funny because I almost called this in the first time I tried to introduce our show. I called it PerfBytes. But what's going on with PerfBytes? I see Leandro's taken off and doing a bunch. What's going on in the PerfBytes world of podcasting?
Well, we're kind of on hiatus, not to sort of compete with you guys, but when all told, we hit about 240 episodes of different things. Some of them a lot, Brian. We did at Perform. They're simulcast or coinciding episodes. There's a great number of them in the back catalog. So we kind of took a pause to support 2 different initiatives at first. One was helping to support PerfBytes Press. So getting into the written world, James Pulley, our colleague and friend, wanted to put together publishing. So we have Leandro has a new book out, which is like the hitchhiking guide to load testing projects.
Yes.
James has one coming out that's about sort of hiring and career professionalism in the performance arts, the dark arts. I have one that I'm cooking on right now, but I'm not going to say anything about it. It's kind of a fun book. At the same time, we supported Leandro much more to kind of launch where he is headed, and we added our also mutual friend Henrik Rexed, who came from the Neotis Tricentis world, is now working with Dynatrace. So Henrik is working on a bunch of new things, and you'll see a lot more YouTubing coming out of us. So you'll have books and videos And Henrik and Leandro have been doing some retakes or sort of re-updates. What do you call that? Sort of refresh of some of our old topics. Reloaded. Yeah, exactly. What's the new Matrix movie? It's like revisited, retired. Matrix Retired, isn't that? Replenished, isn't that?
I don't remember the name.
There's
as a fan of the first movie, I can hope the new one will be decent.
Yes. Hopefully it's not refundable. That would be bad.
Or non-fungible.
Non-fundable. Yeah, refunded.
Fungible.
Yeah. Non-fungible. Yeah. So PerfBytes, we'll see some new stuff happening probably in the new year. If you don't see the picture behind me, it's all remodeling my current studio, changing studios, so we can set up for more YouTubing and more video stuff, which would be fun. And that's some short form tutorials from very intro level performance, the good old performance load testing, performance monitoring, performance management, all the way up to some of the continuous stuff that Andy is still carrying boldly into the future around continuous performance and continuous stuff. So PerfBytes is still happening. And we miss you, Brian. But we'll see. We'll see what we do with the app.
But I was a quitter.
No. You did fantastic work there. Some of those episodes were marvelous, especially the ones that I was on.
Of course. And Leandro.
Hey, Mark, for the few listeners, maybe that it's the first time that they hear your voice and your name.
Really?
Can you? And I think this is still possible, even though it feels like impossible. But
it's like people who haven't heard of Alfred E. Newman. How many of those exist?
Exactly.
Yeah. No. It's when you hit like 30 years in your career, you have to stop assuming that the young kids even know who you are. So. Yeah. I'm Mark Tomlinson. Andy, you and I have known each other for a better part of the last 20 years, and Brian as well, both of you guys. And we kind of met through my former employer, Microsoft, who's not been in the news recently. Of course, this airs in the future, so maybe they are in the news, but they're always in the news. I've been a load tester, performance engineer, a performance optimizer, working on Windows kernel, working on a bunch of different products. For a while, I was the load runner product manager with HP. Now, Micro Focus? All these companies I worked for are going out of business. So, but I'm not. I'm still having a good time doing performance optimization. I worked at PayPal a while ago and kind of got hooked on financial processing and the risks associated with being a payment gateway, payment processor, at least not necessarily a back-end processor. But it's been really fun to overlap security in the financial space, PCI compliance, with all the performance automation that I've come to do. Still working for a startup now in Philly. And still doing some virtual online training. I did one in-person training this summer. It was really fun. That was at the Mile in Denver. So I escaped in the little gap in the weather and went and did a 2-day training, and then came back and put my mask on.
So speaking of Philly, I just want to make a plug for this because I enjoy it. And Mark, I'll send you a link to it as well. There's a guy in Philly, a musician in Philly, who does a show. There's a YouTube show called "What Makes This Song Great." It goes into all music theory and junk. So this guy decided to make one, "What Makes This Song Suck," and he's just relentless, and it just goes down into all sorts of nastiness. It's pretty good. But anyhow, that's completely just on the Philly tip there. So
yeah.
Another lesson, right, is Andy, we should just make sure we never hire Mark because of his track record of sinking companies, right?
That's true. It's a good. Thank you for the reminder.
No, I left, and then like 3-4 years later, they either people go to jail or they get bought out by. I mean, getting bought out is a good thing for some companies. Like you can become huge. Look at Dynatrace. Like
so either
they took over CompuWare.
Either they fell apart without you, or you made them so successful that they went and got bought out. So
got acquired.
That's a good spin.
Except for Microsoft, because then they just made more money being a giant, awesome tech company. Yeah.
Hey, Mark, you already kind of a little bit segued into the topic that we want to talk about today. The kind of intersection between performance and security and a little bit of dev and a little bit of ops, because these are the hot topics these days.
Yeah.
In your current world, where you are working in the financial industry, what is more important, security or performance?
You can be killed by either failings. If you fail security, you die quicker. If you fail performance, you die, I want to say kind of maybe slower. But yeah, in both of my last two roles over the last 8 years, both have been aligned with ops or the DevOps team or the infrastructure team. And I'm currently on an infrastructure team, and I have a peer who is the head of security. We have obviously compliance officers who are, I don't want to say they're not technical people, but they are more about the letter of the rules and the law in some cases, or the policies and governance that we have around compliance that are directly influencing. They're kind of like the PMs for infrastructure security, infrastructure configuration. And then I've been the lone wolf performance person working on the team. And I work day in and day out. I mean, there's not a day goes by that I'm not tuned into the channel with all the security stuff that's happening at the company. And I would say security in this space, based on the risk, is financially much higher in the security space. So financially, that risk is much higher for security because all it takes is one breach to hit the big number. So it's kind of like when the old timey fairs where they had to like hit the mallet and ring the bell, win a prize of some kind. Security, it doesn't take much energy to like hit that little pad and bing, you're done. And and then the CSO gets fired and everyone gets fired and the GRC gets restructured and outsourced to some consulting firm with less experience and blah, blah, blah. But performance is more like a bigger number, because if you have a performance problem that's unabated over many, many months or even years, you will sort of quietly justify spending a lot of your cash, a lot of your money on growth. And every company is focused on growth. And they sort of lose sight of should we have tuned our code? Should we have tuned the database queries? Should we have tuned the infrastructure? Should we have distributed our systems? Should we have gone to more of a scale-out architecture? Slowly over time, should we have made those sort of complex decisions from an architecture standpoint? Or can we just throw hardware at the problem? And can we throw hardware in the cloud? Well, it's just so easy. It's almost painless. So just, there's a few more containers, a few more instances running. Okay, fine. Well, let's just upgrade a little bit here. Even physical infrastructures now are very easy to hot swap stuff and grow what you do. And I look at my current employer and I look at the business charts in terms of throughput. I can look at transactional throughput for a specific type. We're like a payment gateway. So I can look at transactions for a particular web service, and I know whether business is good or business is bad. And that curve in the 3+ years that I've been there has been like on a nonstop rocket ride, increasing growth. There's a pandemic in the middle. Sure, we took a little bit of a dip in the pandemic, but when business started to come back, or people figured out how to do business in a pandemic or after a pandemic, boom, that number goes right back up. So I think performance can be more costly over the long term because it just sort of becomes this benign thing that, we'll just keep growing. We'll throw some more hardware. We'll throw some more licenses. And then you get to a point where, oh my gosh, we hit some major bottleneck we can't do. And there is a very typical Mark Tomlinson, very long answer to your question, Andy.
So performance is more like termites in your house, where security is a bundle of dynamite.
Yes, I don't want to go into like illness, because it's it's a really illness kind of thing. So a slow death, sort of like But I think it's more about cost, Brian. To be honest with you, like to your point about termites, to fix the results of many years of termite infestation means you kind of have to rip the house down to its bones and rebuild the bones, because that's where those, you know what, I should optimize this wall over here, but it takes so much work to tear it down and rebuild it. A lot of people think about performance and architecture that way. And security-wise, it's when I'm working closely with security folks, the one thing, and I think we even talked about it back on the 100th episode, was the nomenclature of a vulnerability, which I love in the InfoSec world. And business people, when we come from the testing world, it's pass or fail. It's a bug or it's not a bug. And things get wonky with those conversations when people are like, should we fix this bug or should we not fix this bug? What's the priority? What's the nuance? What's going on here? X, Y, and Z. If you present things in the InfoSec world, it's like everyone's already in the infrastructure team ready to say, oh yeah, vulnerability. That makes sense to me. So we have risk. What are the chances of it being exploited in reality or not? Do we have any secondary or tertiary mechanisms to prevent the exploitation? And that's one of the key things that I've changed in the last 50 episodes of Pure Performance is really adopting this nomenclature of vulnerability and percentage risk. What are the odds? And trying to estimate, well, it's only going to affect 10% of the traffic, and that 10% of the traffic is only, so you learn how to kind of narrow the scope or understanding of the context for what is a performance vulnerability, which is to say things in a database like an optimizer. What are the chances that this particular plan is going to end up in production? Well, I don't know. Let's take a look at how the optimizer works. And if there's other stuff, the other interesting thing from security is using that vulnerability language is we start adding, more ciphers or more encryption or more layers in the architecture. Oh, we're going to put another firewall in, or we're going to jump through another device that's going to scan for this and scan for that, and packet inspection and stuff. How much of that is appropriately coded or built asynchronously? Does it interrupt the transaction flow? So as people are getting more and more paranoid, they throw more and more security mechanisms or features into the architecture. If they end up being synchronous, you're going to spend a few, milliseconds. Maybe you're going to spend, let's say, 50 milliseconds for every transaction, times a couple million transactions an hour. That adds up, in terms of maybe there's another 5% CPU. Boom, now you're out of CPU. So there's some amazing things around really what's the vulnerability, and then looking at this way of seeing security grow, and then what's the performance impact of that. So that's been the biggest thing in the last 5-6 years for me, is really seeing the overlaps.
So I had a couple of different thoughts actually in the beginning of the episode on where I want to go with this discussion, but now as you bring it up, these additional layers, do you see performance engineers asking for these additional security layers to be added to the performance environment as well? And or is it even possible for some organizations to add all these security layers also in the testing environment? Because otherwise, how would you ever know that under a certain load you have these 50 milliseconds of overhead per transaction?
Yeah. It's the old days are gone where we tried to replicate production. I have a shirt that says "Test in prod" or "Live a lie." I love it. And so I think performance engineers, and I wouldn't say other performance engineers, but people I've talked to, I have office hours, and people can contact me and just talk about stuff, whatever they're dealing with in the discipline. And many, many more of them are getting access. They've been sort of in the testing world or now the development world. And I'm like, you really need to live almost purely in ops with all the access. One of the nice things, we're a small company, and I'm kind of the only performance guy. I have a lot of access to all of the dashboards, all of the monitoring, and all of the data to pull stuff out. And another colleague of mine has joined the company recently, and he's getting a PhD in InfoSec security with an emphasis in infrastructure. So machine learning based on infrastructure around vulnerabilities. And he's going to be a doctor of security. Dr. Security. It's going to be awesome. His name's Cliff. He's really awesome. So there's some really interesting things about if you can get your hands on the data, you can do a lot of amazing stuff. So I would encourage every performance engineer, a lot of the answers I'm giving them are, hey, you have to go look in production to see what, why is it another 150 milliseconds slower in production, and look at the number of hops, start a dialogue with the security folks. Hey, what's this other device in the path? What's, in my lab or in my test experiment environment? I don't see these components. And that's tantamount, like if you're kind of put the blinders on and you just do it the old, I ran the query and I kind of do it what used to be when I'd say prod was deceptively simple, we could replicate that in a lab pretty easily. You just can't do it now, especially with cloud services. My performance test environment is in Azure, and a lot of our physical infrastructure is sort of hybrid. It's half in the cloud and half hybrid. So I adjust if I look and I find a bug within database I/O, for instance. I know that my database I/O, even on the Ultra SSDs in Azure, is still about 20 or 30 milliseconds per I/O request slower than production. And so only if I find a bug in that area, like, hey, we've got a lot of I/O overhead for this particular query, or we've got an incorrect mix of read and write, those kinds of things you have to sort of adjust on the fly, but you kind of have to know as a performance engineer, what's my target environment? What are the differences? And I always have a cheat sheet of, for each machine, here's the lab CPU and here's production CPU, disk, memory, network, its configuration. And what's the difference? And if anything's plus or minus more than 10% difference, then I usually downgrade whatever bug I find. This looks like a bug, but what? And then I go back to that vulnerability language, which is like, okay, I found a bug, but it's a bug with CPU, and my CPU is like 50% different. So maybe we don't hit this bug for a while in production, or if ever. And so you learn to communicate differently based on the differences between your lab and that.
Just briefly, I wanted to say that the CPU thing came up in your perf puzzlers we did the one time, and it's becoming a sort of a lost art, right? If you're moving to the cloud, you can no longer really consider that stuff. But I also wonder, for people who are still running machines on-prem, how many are looking at hardware? And I just mentioned this because it was never a factor back when I was doing load testing. But anyway, don't want to sidetrack with that. I know Andy had that. I just wanted to interject that because that hardware stuff always comes up in performance when I talk to you, but rarely any other time. So
yeah,
it's interesting.
That's just because other people don't know what they're doing, Brian. There's got to be a CPU somewhere,
right?
And you're paying for it, even if you can't see it. And that's the real question: is if I'm paying for something, I damn well better be able to see it. I need to be able to get the data, get my hands on the data, monitor the data, track the data, trace that data. And that's a problem. If that's one of the things you guys have talked a bit about, serverless performance and serverless instrumentation. How do you monitor, hey, serverless, what's the cost? I'll just take the bill. And it's like, great, we ran serverless. Two of the folks recently that I've talked to have gone, the serverless, they're doing like Lambda or something in the cloud. And I forget the name of the on-prem. You can have your own sort of serverless server on-prem. And they took their functions that they were paying for, let's say roundabout I think it was about $2,500 a month in terms of the bill they were getting from Lambda to run serverless, a lot of transactions. And they just switched it to a 2-node cluster of like the little pizza boxes, with state-of-the-art processors, and away we go. And of course, that investment cost them probably $10,000 for those 2 little boxes. And of course, the performance blew the doors off of Lambda in the cloud. And it cost them $10,000. Figure those pizza boxes are going to last them 3 to 4 years. Then they have plenty of overhead. So there's still people that fall back out of the cloud, Brian. And they're like, you know what? Am I really getting what I'm paying for here? Why can't you let me see these things? So I'm kind of a cloud skeptic. I work at a startup right now that has stuff in the cloud, has stuff on premise. I can see, the argument and benefit for both, for sure. It definitely security wise, in terms of if you really are going to be held liable for stuff, some of those PCI audits go much easier if you're like, we own everything in the cage. It's done right here in that building over there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hey, one quick question. So because you bring up the term vulnerability in the context of performance, which I like. For me, it feels a little bit like what we do with looking at different performance metrics and then grading them and coming up with a score, right? What we do with Captain, and I know it's the first time I said it today, but with it, Captain, here we go. And I wonder if we should, like the term vulnerability, and we talk about it as an SLO score. If it makes more sense that we say, hey, we come up with a score, but basically in the end, it is a measure of high risk, medium risk, or low risk. And then if you combine that with your vulnerability scans, maybe that come out of your security tools, then you have a nice matrix where you can say, I don't know, performance. Now people cannot see my hands right now, but you guys can. So you have like
he's got one hand up.
Yeah, one hand up. It's performance vulnerability, and then the second one,
second hand next to it,
security vulnerability. And then the third one, you could even do like your functional vulnerabilities, because essentially functional performance security. And then you come up hopefully with 3 green lights. But if one of them is yellow or orange or red, then you have a challenge.
So you're right, Andy. If we think back a good chunk of time, there was an initiative and a bunch of writing around risk-based testing. And it was an attempt to test or attach the testing disciplines and a lot of the actual idea of testing to business risk and or risk to an end user, risk to security, risk to health, the end user's experience. There's all kinds of extensions that we did that. But to me, it wasn't until like the whole InfoSec security testing world came along that it cemented this word vulnerability. And it's even in technical jargon, vulns, right? VULNS. And there's all of the 0-day initiative stuff happened. And these are, do you have this ailment? Do you have this vulnerability? Yes, my system does. It has not been patched or healed, or we haven't done anything with the patching. And what's interesting for performance is you can think of it as a performance patch. Like in our DevOps, in our pipeline, like I'll actually make recommendations from a code review or something. I'll go try something out, and I'll pull whatever change I make on a branch into the performance lab for some special rounds of testing. Or I work with a developer that's, hey, here's a bunch of stuff we did around async, task-based programming. So let's take a branch and go do a special initiative of testing around a particular thing. And then if it goes well, we go back and say, you don't have to put this fix in. You don't have to push this patch or update, but it's been tested to be beneficial when the right time comes. And it could be business risk-wise. Hey, we made our numbers. We could take some downtime, X, Y, and Z. Who knows when the business sort of makes that decision? But it's been sort of vetted and hardened, if you will, through a performance test as, hey, here are a list of performance updates. When you'd like to merge them back in, go ahead and do that. And then you'll see the pull request come through and it'll go. Almost all of our security testing is that sort of, in development or production. I don't have a lot of security testing in the performance-wise unless my security guys call me and say, hey, we're changing this device. Can you go review it? So I'll just do a paper, online review of how many bytes per second, what are the routes we're going to run through it, what do the paths look like, what kind of packet inspection, what options are we going to enable, what's the overhead. A lot of the networking devices, even some in the cloud, their specification is very good around performance in terms of saying, hey, if you enable this type of packet inspection or this type of intrusion detection or intrusion prevention, there's CPU overhead and latency when you enable this configuration. The device itself, if you turn all the features off, is just a network switch. So, boom, it can do a bunch of work and go really fast with throughput, at least the non-blocking throughput for the back end of the switching on the device. And in the cloud, that's all happening in the back end. But again, they have feature switches. So if you turn it on and things get slow, usually you can read a lot of that proactively and say, We need to buy 2 of these and run them in parallel to match our future growth projection. And that means if you do that architecturally, now I have 2 separate stacks versus 1 stack. And all of a sudden, the cost-benefit analysis gets kind of wonky, gets really weird because, we weren't planning on making those kinds of changes. We weren't planning on having 2 devices for a throughput overhead. And they go back and they rethink this. That beautiful idea of, shouldn't we do this for security's sake? Yes. Zscaler is a good example. The Zscaler client goes everywhere on a bunch of people's desktops. Well, they push the Zscaler client onto my load generators. And I'm like, I'm not going to have you sniffing my packets because I'm an employee generating this load. Like, and it's set up to only go to a certain lab. So security people usually get the green light because what they'll say is, well, we're more secure. Approved. Done. Do it. And they will come back around and be like, did you think really about the overhead you're introducing? It's a huge problem as far as I experience it, for sure.
But to let's say dumb it down for me, in the end, what you're telling me, it's an additional 1 or 2 components, layers that you just have to factor in, and as a performance engineer, need to do your analysis on, how much overhead does it produce? What's the impact on your resource consumption, on your let's say, response time or throughput or whatever, you're optimizing for. And then just do your capacity planning again and figure out how can we achieve our numbers with those additional components, or maybe there's some tweaks that you can do on those components, right, on how to make them better. Because I assume also these security layers, in the end, there's some software running somewhere, and you can probably turn knobs and switches to also optimize it for your use cases.
So some of the initiatives that I have done, speaking of not having these components for security in the lab, is our good friend product, the Squid Proxy, and a couple others. Toxi Proxy is good at doing this. I've used Montblanc to do it. Or you can try some of the commercial products. And that's just to, in the lab, I don't really care about the security in and of itself. I don't need to actually do encryption, decryption, etc. I just need to put the representation of the latency or in the link to do it. So in between my load generator and the web service or the web server or the front end of the application, I'll just put a proxy in there and maybe add that 2 to 3 milliseconds of latency. And then you can do some what if scenarios. Like, what if we enabled configuration for packet inspection and blocking of X, Y, and Z inspection? And the docs say that could add anywhere between 8 and 10 milliseconds to every transaction and handshake. Okay, so I put that into my proxy and I can do sort of a low, medium, high latency. It's not really WAN emulation, but you're sort of using that slowness to represent other layers of security. And then, of course, take a baseline with everything turned off. So you'd be like, what's the actual impact to doing that? And oddly, you'll find that you have more capacity potentially on the back end because you have something slowing it down in the front end. But that's the thing, is like, we've spent all this money on the back end to make things really, really fast, even if they're running in the cloud. But we introduce these layers in front of our systems, and now that's the bottleneck.
What this reminds me of? It reminds me of Steve Souther's 80-20 rule, where he said, why are you optimizing anything in the back end if the biggest problem is your large image that you're downloading, and or like the JavaScript in your browser, or right? I mean, that's well, it's only a 250K icon map. That can't be a big deal. Well, how many employees are at your company? 150,000 employees, and this is the HR website. Yes. And you're putting this link in an all points, all reply, all storm. Oh man. That's another weird one, is a reply all with a rich content on an email, and it's a reply all storm. It's a human behavior, right? But every time that email every time the email got opened, it's loading all of that content because there was no browser cache. Wouldn't that be a great feature request now for Microsoft, saying your Outlook has to have you confirm that the reply all is really meant? Maybe it would be great.
Are you sure you want to annoy the hell out of everybody?
Are you sure? Because Outlook could do the math, right, for you. It could say, hey, you're replying all to 50,000 people, and that means I don't know how many gigabyte of data that is now being transferred. Are you really sure? I think that would be an interesting...
Or could have you, or could ask you something like, does everybody on this thread need to see a reply saying congratulations to Joe's promotion?
Yeah.
Or does just Joe need this? And do you want to just... No, we get those all the time. Sorry, that's like a pet peeve of mine. And then you do the reply all saying, please don't reply all. That's always the best one too.
That's right. So that's what we've come down to here on the 150th episode.
Exactly.
Is that the best thing you can do to optimize performance is to not reply all.
Well,
thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Andy, I wanted to ask you, Andy, you work a lot more closely with the security aspect of our products now. But one thing I had never considered, which Mark is bringing to the topic here, is performance and security. Yes, we have security in our tool, but it was more about just security and knowing if things are going on. And I think a lot of people think of security either in two ways: is our code secure, and did we leave any vulnerabilities in it, or is someone doing a DDoS attack on us, and are we? But the idea of the performance impact of all these security layers that are being added in between the front end and in every device and everything in between, which, just like if you think about APM tools, people always ask, well, what's our overhead? And it's, well, you can measure it and you do the trade-off of what you're getting. Same thing with security. But it's like, and this is what blows my mind about you, Mark, and which is why, I look up to you as a performacologist, as you called yourself at one point, is that so many people get stuck in the world of performance of, I run my tests, I look at my response times, and just earlier we were talking about looking at the hardware, now considering the security features that are being turned on to devices and all these other kind of bits and pieces. It's that Pandora's box that performance is, that is just never ending, and having the exposure to even know to think about these things is just phenomenal.
One on the agent thing, when you think about sort of bytecode instrumentation or on-the-fly profiling, when you enable more profiling within an agent, you get more CPU overhead potentially. So you want to be we've done a lot to speed up processors in our industry, and bus speeds are really great. Second, we've optimized the agents, right? The profiling agents are way more efficient and use a lot of asynchronous programs so that you're not blocking anything. But the third thing I'll say is there are security products, a couple of them in the commercial space, and there's some open source ones too, that do, like, for out of Heartbleed, and then there was another one that was like the CPU or processor metadata virus infection, something that's very, very low level in in the processor itself. And there are products that, like, you need to put this on every machine. And it made me think of 20 years ago when we, as an industry, came out with bytecode instrumentation and put our agents and profilers out there. It was like, you should profile all these machines, and suddenly everything's slow, and you're like, oh, maybe we need to re-architect our agent. I've actually done some load tests with some of those agents, and I'm like, what did they tell you this agent would do for overhead? Well, they said it might affect it a little bit. Yeah, the salespeople always tell you something. But, a real engineer is going to be like, all right, let's see worst case scenario. Turn all the options on, and then, turn them off one by one. And I found one particular option that was absolutely the worst, and added 40% CPU on everything for a machine that was normally 5-10% CPU. And had lots of headroom for other spikes. But boom, all of a sudden it's running at 50% CPU. And I'm like, what is going on with this? Of course, we call the vendor and tell them, hey, we're not going to move forward with your product because we like this feature, this security option. We want it, but it's way too slow. And sure enough, they're like, well, we went and talked to the developer, and apparently we found some bugs in there that we're kind of blocking on them. Oh, yeah. And I'm like, oh, man. We're right back to performance profiling for performance reasons, or profiling in agents for performance reasons. And the security world is still, in a way, they're still catching up.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, yeah, I guess security is not the only thing we should think about. We should also think about performance of our agent, because they'll be out of business. Nobody will install them. because they're like, you don't go with that product.
But that's a great
because it sucks.
opportunity now, isn't it? A great opportunity for performance enthusiasts like us and like
Yeah.
all the other listeners to really reach out to the security experts in your organization and say, hey, it's great what you're doing, but be reminded of the potential performance impact, and let me tell you some stories on my experience if you are rolling something like this out.
Or start or start with a more open-ended question. Have you guys ever had to roll back something, you're a security agent or patch or something because it screwed something up? And of course, they're also very, I would say, secretive for good reasons, right? They're very discerning about talking about the security patches and everything at the company. Just because it's security, they're like, they don't make it really company-wide knowledge. It's kind of a secret little group. So you want to build a relationship with that team in a way that says, hey, if you guys ever want to try these things out before you push them, we have a lab we could set up, and we got some ways we could figure out what the overhead is. And, can you share with me the documentation? We can review what the specs are, hardware-wise or even software-wise. Even Amazon, some of the Amazon stuff or the Azure stuff, they're very specific about, hey, using this in your architecture will have certain limitations. And knowing what transactions would be limited by those options just kind of help just say, you guys think about all the security hackerness. That's nice. That's great. White hat people. And I'll just do some study of latency and study of overhead, especially Brian, if you're in a physical world, you do have very limited machinery or resources. So that's much more urgent. If you're in the cloud, you maybe don't have unlimited funds, but you can be more elastic, which is very, very true.
Yeah. Hey, one more question. Do you think from a performance engineering perspective, should you also think of actually running load against the security appliances to really figure out how do they behave in case, let's say, really a denial of service attack comes in, or something like a high influx in requests come in that are hard to analyze, but then will be blocked or maybe not blocked. But is it also part, like, do you see this as part of the future performance engineer that is secure aware that they also need to generate load that brings exactly these security devices to, let's say, the edge? Or is this something that the security team, the hack, whatever they're called, are doing or should do?
Yeah. I think the vendors should be doing that and publishing their specs. They know what kind of traffic and the specifics of what their filters and their scans or their packet inspection does feature-wise. And so they should have every appliance manager, if you're in the physical world, should be doing that. And if you're rolling out a software-based feature or a hardware-based feature in the cloud, and you're going to wrap something in front of it to make it accessible in the cloud, as a provider, it should be on the producer of that service or the producer of that product. I have only rarely done a appliance only or security solution only kind of load test. And I did it with very low level stuff. Really old companies that did low level packet generation. It wasn't even really application level. So you're much layer in the OSI stack to be able to do that. And again, the company escapes my name. I'm never gonna. Yeah, I try to remember all these names. They don't exist anymore, right, Brian? So I don't need to worry about them. So I think for the most part, you're still just generating load through an application stack that's using HTTPS and set up with the routes, or whatever protocols you're using. Application level traffic through the stack is usually enough to trip over anything egregious. The other thing I'll say is with deep packet inspection, if they're doing filtering on that, your payloads from an application standpoint might become more specific. So you might not just do a recording and replay it and woohoo, everything looks good. That's a false negative, meaning I didn't have payload in there that would get picked up by the inspection, and then the inspection does something additional to scan it, log it, do something different. So I think there is the vulnerability, the limitation that the payloads of your load generation might not actually send in the right patterns or the right actual data for packet inspection. And that's a big difference. But I've known only once or twice, and it was at Microsoft. Just testing ISA appliance. I think we did some stuff with partnership with F5 back in the day, F5 Networks, some of their security things, mostly around load balancing and actually, network routing and things like that. But yeah, I don't think that's in most with be able to have that conversation with a security person and before they implement it, try to catch them before they push something blindly to production. Because, the next thing you know, you're going to delete all your routes on the internet and disappear from DNS.
That never happened, did it?
Never happened.
Never happened. At the time of
it happened in October of 2021 to Facebook.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. Hey, Mark, it's always a pleasure having you on the show. There's always so much we can learn from you, and I know. Yeah. Now we're really happy. We're not just saying this to make you feel good. We say this because we mean it.
And we pity you, so we try to have you on to make you feel better about your life. Yes,
I live a small life down here.
Well, you are in Philly, right? So
we also hope that not in the too distant future or in the past, whenever this airs, we will be able to see each other face to face. Hopefully, we'll see each other perform in Vegas, right? Because that's happening physically, and it seems the Europeans are now also allowed to travel to the States.
That's nice.
So it's going to be good. And
that'll be good.
Yeah. So what I've learned, the best thing we can all do to stop bad performance problems is to avoid the reply all and advocate for the reply all. To not be misused.
Number one takeaway.
Exactly. No, that's something that I put in the abstract of the podcast episode. But I think the other thing for me, and this was the revelation, is really, it's as a performance engineer in the security space, it's really about understanding the overhead of these individual layers. Because initially I thought performance engineers also really need to use more security tools to really include, scans and whatever security tools spit out. But I think this is definitely something for the security team who we should collaborate with very closely. But really performance engineers really need to understand the impact of these additional layers on the resiliency, on the performance of the app that they are testing, right? And then making the right recommendations on how to get to the ultimate goal, which is high-performing, high-available, and secure applications.
Yeah. I'd say, Andy, we talked a lot about sort of performance in the infrastructure and ops space. There's a lot of performance anti-patterns in code as well, where you're seeing some kind of do some backflips, jump through some flaming hoops in code logic to try to be more secure. I've seen some really weird stuff that introduces sort of a mutex or semaphores for thread blocking. I've seen limitations where every request has to check this and check that before it proceeds. And, there's some really sort of harebrained ideas, harebrained, HARE, which is like offensive to rabbits.
Damn you, Mark.
I know. They'll come at me on Twitter, the hare population. But yeah, so that's another episode to talk about sort of code anti-patterns that for security, they're great patterns. But for performance, not so great.
SecPerf.
There you go.
I was thinking PerfSec sounds better, but it's security performance makes more sense than performance security.
Exactly.
Cool.
So yeah, to your point, Andy, I mean that's my big thing too. Is just for any performance person there. Yes, Mark's pointing as watch for any performance person out there. One more thing to consider: security. Add it to the list of the rabbit hole that you must understand. More hair references there. So thank you again, Mark, for being on our virtual 150th episode. And
yes, congratulations on 150 episodes. May you have 150 more.
Yes. It's been a long time. Thank you, everyone, for listening and being part of our show for 150 episodes. And you know what? If anyone's been with us since episode 1, tweet us. Mark will send you something.
I will.
No, you won't. But let us know at pure_DT on Twitter. And we thank you all for listening. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Till next time. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Ciao.